Well, hello and welcome to this episode of GeekyJustin Live, where we take faith, gender, sexuality, and geekdom, sprinkle in the unexpected, and roll it all up in a delicious wrap of nuance. I'm Justin Lee, and with me today is Jane Clementi, the co-founder and CEO of the Tyler Clementi Foundation. Jane, hi, how are you?
Hi, Justin. I'm fine, and happy Pride to you. Because up here in New York, New Jersey area, it is Pride Month to a max. So happy Pride.
Happy Pride to you too. You know, I grew up in North Carolina, where North Carolina Pride is always like in the fall sometime, and so I always felt weird with like everybody talking about Pride, and we were always off the schedule. So. And living in Orlando now, it seems like it's Pride every day in Orlando. It's just a special place.
Well, this is something very new to me as well. I did not grow up with Pride, but I am embracing it fully at this point in my life.
Yeah, well, you know, that's true for both of us. Neither one of us grew up with particularly affirming, LGBTQ affirming views, and that's something that we've both come to as, you know, life has taken us through circumstances. Yeah.
Matured for me. You just got on your journey, but I've matured. Yes, go ahead. That's okay.
Well, I hope I've done some maturing. So, I want you to get it. I want to give you a chance. Boy, I'm just stumbling over everything today. I want to give you a chance to share a little of your story for folks who aren't already familiar with it. But I have to tell you that right from the beginning, our live Facebook audience is chiming in with all of these hellos to Jane. So, so.
I can't see it, but I will see it later when I get to watch it in response to this. But I don't usually watch in response, so I don't know if I will see it. So I just want to say hello to everyone out there, too, that I love you all, and that it's all about the people and the relationships, and I've certainly been embraced by many, and I'm so grateful for that.
Well, I'll tell you right now that Kenneth says, hi, Jane, welcome. Rob says, Jane, love you and miss you, my friend. Cynthia says, hello, Justin and Jane, happy Pride. Carol says, hi, Justin. Hi, Carol. Thanks for saying hi to me. I assume hi to Jane as well. And Damon says, woke up from an after work nap just in time. This one is going to be hard, which I think is a reference to the fact that we're going to talk about some heavy stuff on this show, but I think important stuff, because I want to talk some about how the painful and challenging times from our past can affect us, and how do we go forward in a way that's healthy and in a way that makes a positive impact on the world instead of getting stuck in all of that pain from the past. But you certainly know a lot about that. For folks who aren't familiar with your story already and Tyler's story, do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. So my story became public in the fall of 2010 when Tyler made national headlines, unfortunately for all the wrong reasons. It was at that point that he had just started his freshman year at Rutgers University, and his roommate chose to target Tyler, I believe, for his sexual orientation, something that was a God-given trait of Tyler's, but made him different and special from his roommate. And he used that difference to humiliate Tyler. He live streamed Tyler having sex with another man, and then he posted about it on social media, tweeting about it and posting on Facebook. And it was as Tyler kept reading those comments and jokes that his reality became very twisted and distorted, I believe. And it was in that dark, lonely, isolating time that Tyler made a terrible decision, a decision that we can never change or undo. As much as I prayed for it to change, that's not going to change. That was not God's will. And the reality was that Tyler made a permanent decision to a temporary situation. And on September 22nd, 2010, Tyler died by suicide. He was only 18 years old. And as much as I and Joe want to go back, as I said before, we can't change that. But what we realized slowly, it took me longer, is that we could move forward. And in order to move forward, what we had to do was to make sure that no one else would ever experience that pain, shame, or humiliation that Tyler experienced. And that's why we started the Tyler Clementi Foundation. Not really clear or sure where we were going to go with it, but we settled on making a mission of putting an end to all online and offline bullying in schools, workplaces, and faith communities.
We've
and
talked
I couldn't
about
look
this.
at you, Justin, and we've talked about it a lot, and I couldn't even look at you when I was telling that because it would have made it too difficult for me. So I'm sorry.
It's yeah, it's such an incredibly tragic story, and I have shared before, I remember hearing the news of Tyler's death when it was national news. I didn't know you then. I didn't know him. And I know, like a lot of LGBTQ folks out there, felt a particular sense of connection to him and to his story, because so many of us also have been, in one way or another, bullied, made to feel less than, spent time hating ourselves because of who we are, and many of us have dealt with significant depression, and I can't imagine. I know how emotional it's been for me every time I think about Tyler's story. I cannot begin to imagine what it must be like for you as his mother. And so you started this foundation to end online and offline bullying. One of the things that I've always wondered, and we've talked about this a little bit, is when you have that kind of pain, that kind of painful story that prompts you to do something like start this foundation, a foundation in his name. How do you go forward every day working at this foundation in your son's name, knowing that the reason you're doing this is because of this horrible thing that happened, and let that motivate you rather than just curling up into a ball and saying, I just can't do it?
And that's a complicated question, and there is no simple answer. And you are talking to me now 8.5, almost 3/4 years after the most horrific experience ever, when my life shattered apart into a million pieces. And it was not a simple, easy journey for me. That is totally for sure. But hearing people's stories and hearing the love out there that wherever I went, people did connect to Tyler in some level. And I do believe that everyone's story is different, but I do think the emotional pain and shame that Tyler experienced is pretty universal. And many people experience it at some level. And sadly, I was pulled into that downward spiral myself. I mean, obviously, with the loss of Tyler, everything stopped and became empty. And I was in a really deep depression myself. And I used to tell people I want to escape. They would laughingly or jokingly say, oh, yeah, you should go for a trip here or there. But my escape was a permanent escape to the eternal. And it was not just a temporary escape, because I just needed that pain to stop. And I think many people are at that level for sure. And it is not a simple, easy, magical one that is cast over anyone, but it is a slow, steady, hard work journey to dig yourself out of that pit. And I was blessed right from the start to have God's presence very, very palpable in that journey. I guess God knew that I was questioning how he could let this happen right off the bat. I mean, there's so many levels there. Some people say, how could you get over your anger for certain people that, did this to Tyler, but there were many people above that person, many people before the roommate that I needed to forgive. I needed to forgive God, first of all. I needed to forgive myself, because that shame I felt too. How could my son be experiencing this and I not know anything about what was happening? A mother should know everything, and that's a false truth, but that's how I believed at the time. And that shame of my son rather taking his own life rather than telling me or talking to me, I just could not fathom that for the longest time. And I kept spiraling into that what if and the could have and the should have. And if only I had space. And I also needed to forgive Tyler in there too for doing what he did. So all these people are in there and spiraling out of control, and all I could do was take little tiny steps. And I was blessed, as I said, to have God's presence. He talked to me in simple words. I'm not a theologian, but interestingly, when I couldn't focus on anything, I couldn't focus on watching anything or listening to much or reading anything, I could focus on a few verses and a few words. And I did not grow up growing in a church. I grew up in a church, but a church that did not rely on scriptures that heavily, so you didn't have to memorize scripture as a young child. But it was in that dark moment that I could hold on and hold on to a few verses, a few words, simple words like those who look to God are radiant and their faces are never covered in shame. And I'd have to say that over and over and over again. And eventually, after several years, 5 years, 6 years, I started to believe that. And it was turning my life around and taking positive steps forward. And all the beautiful connections that God put in my path, such as you. Do you remember when we first met?
I do, yes.
Because that's one of the first memories I remember. And that was several years into my journey. I think it was at least 3 or 4 years. I don't remember clearly. Do you? You could share your side, and then I could share my side. The crazy lady that stalked you and came right up to you. You were very kind, and I enjoyed the conversation thoroughly. I don't remember exactly when it was. I have to confess, I'm so terrible at remembering like when things happen. Like when I was writing my first book, Torn, I had to go back and like find all my research, all my notes to put things together, because I would misremember the order that things happened in, and then I would say, I think this happened around this time, and I would go look and not find it, and they say, oh no, actually it happened much later or much earlier than I remembered. So I am not the person to ask. Well, I think that's a good thing. I think that's a healthy space, because for a while I was stuck in dates, and dates held me captive, and I knew everything from the point of September 22nd. And it was 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 48 months, 50 months. I mean, until whatever. And I would have a few years ago known exactly when I met you, but now things do kind of blend and flow. And I think that means that it's a path for healing. And we were in Washington, D.C., and I had just read your book. And I did have a heads up that you were coming. And I was in a fog at that point, and I didn't really talk much to people. If they came and approached me, I would like to try to engage them in conversations, but I certainly would never approach anyone, especially not someone who just wrote a book. But I felt like I knew you because you had shared so much of your life. And I just had to come up, and it was just this push from behind. Who knows? Maybe it was God. Maybe it was Tyler, because I do believe Tyler's with me at places and times and gets nudging me forward. But it is a slow and long process. And it's not easy. And that's one of the reasons why at the foundation, I try to focus on people who kind of come through the dark and have some kind of resolution. And that's what we call upstander stories. And we want to show how they became an upstander, or how they stood up for someone else, or how someone else stood up for them. We don't want to get stuck in the pit. People are there for a long time, and it's not saying it's not true, but we want to help other people get out of that pit. And by sharing our experiences in the positive light, I believe that is how we get there.
Yeah, and I want to talk about the upstanders and the work that the foundation is doing. Two things I should mention really quickly. First, one thing I want to mention, one question I want to ask you. one thing I want to mention is when you're talking about dates, I it's funny because like that's something that for me has been a big deal with when I lost my mom, which is I think it's so important when talking about the painful experiences that shape us to recognize that people's painful experiences are very different, and you can't, like, my experience of losing my mom was in a very different set of circumstances, and than your loss of Tyler, and it's really different losing a parent, losing a child, but my loss of my mom, it's had a really profound impact on me. I think about her all the time, and one of the things that was really important to me was I intentionally I didn't want to remember the date that she died. That for me was like I was afraid I wouldn't be able to let go of it, and so to this day people ask when it is, and if I try hard enough I could tell you, but like I don't want to think about it. But folks who watch this show all the time know that I always have different usually geeky mugs that I drink out of, and today I'm drinking out of a mug that I got from my mom years ago in her honor, because it just seemed appropriate while we were talking about painful things from the past and letting it move us forward. So I wanted to ask you
And actually, I'm drinking out of a mug that someone gave me like 4 days after we lost Tyler, and it meant a lot to me. And it came with a card that had significance as well, because it talked about Psalm 94 about the feathers and under the arm, wings of God, and I can't do it justice. Something about it's on my screen on my phone. He who lives in the shelter of the Most High will find rest, and one of the things I couldn't do is find rest. And the shadow of the Almighty will cover you with his feathers and shelter you with his wings. And before I opened that morning, as I walked down the stairs, there were 2 little feathers on the rug. And I mean, I'm sure there's a logical explanation. Somebody brought them in with their feet, whatever, but I had bent down, picked them up, threw them away. And then I went and opened this box and that card with that verse, and I knew God's presence was there with those feathers. And God sent me lots and lots of feathers all along my journey. Some larger, like some wings, and some tiny ones from like underneath, more like the down. And it's another thing that some people connect with that who have lost someone. And many times we have opposite opinions, things like you didn't get caught in that downward spiral of dates, and I got trapped there. But God, I believe, released me like one link of the chain at a time. He loosened those chains. And that was one thing that finally loosened, but not for about 6 years, sadly.
Yeah, wow. I love those little stories though, of the little moments of grace and the little signs like that even if like you said, like somebody else could come in and say, oh well, here's the logical explanation for this or that, but the power of it in the moment is what really matters.
Right. Serendipitous. I used
yes.
to say they were God instances, but then some people were offended by that. So now I just say it's serendipitous and let them take it for what they want.
All right.
Not everyone thinks like you and me.
So we've got some comments coming in. Donna says, I feel the same of my sister who took her own life. I can't tell you of that date. I can relate. What a painful thing though, to lose somebody to suicide is just, yeah. I'll say something else about that in just a second. Damon says, partnered with mom in to watch and listen with me. Recently was released from the hospital for both physical and mental health. Thankfully, I reached out to a friend from church instead of remaining alone with my pain and thoughts. She says hello and sends love. We will listen together.
I'm glad that they're there with us now today.
Yeah. Lisa says, sending so much love to you through the pain of the loss of Tyler. You continue to be a voice for our gay children. I can't wait to meet Tyler someday on the other side and tell him how much we love him and tell him what an amazing mom you are. I pray for you to have strength to continue sharing.
Yeah.
So I want to say something before we get too far, I don't want to dwell on the topic of suicide, but because, you mentioned it a couple of times a few minutes ago, and obviously that's something that's resonating with folks. I wanted to ask, when you hear from folks who are dealing with depression, suicidal thoughts, and so forth, do you have resources that you recommend to them, or something that you suggest, a place that you suggest that they go for those kinds of resources?
Well, if they're in crisis, certainly to call a helpline. They're definitely a great resource. There's the National Suicide Helpline. There's also the Trevor Project, specific for LGBTQ, and they also even do texting now, which is the new thing. So young people might feel more comfortable texting than making that phone call. And of course, always have the support of a mental health counselor. Get connected as soon as you can. And if you aren't connected with a mental health counselor and it is a crisis, go to the emergency room. And if it's a crisis, you need to treat it immediately. You can't push it off to contact an organization, but definitely get connected. And if someone tells you that they're thinking about self-harm, make sure that you get them connected to something. Even if they make you promise that you'll be quiet and you won't tell anyone. I don't know how many young people I've talked to who, in their darkest moments, they confided in a friend, and that friend did just what they were asked not to do. They told their parent, they told an adult, they told someone, and they got the person the help that they needed. And now, after the fact, when they're telling me this story, they're always so grateful for that friend for not holding that truth. You have to know when to hold a confidence and when it's self-harming to break that confidence.
Yeah. Thanks. I wanted to make sure that we got that out there, and I knew would be the right one to say that. Thank you for that. So let's talk about looking forward. You talked about the foundation doing this work with Upstanders. So what does it mean to be an Upstander, and why is that? What is the foundation doing with regard to Upstanders?
Thank you for asking me that wonderful question, Justin. So one of the things that we saw that as we were learning more about what happened to Tyler was that there were lots of people who saw what was happening and no one said anything. So, and then as I was learning more and more about bullying situations, I found that was very true. Usually in 85 or 90% of the time, there are witnesses. That's the whole point of lots of times the humiliation, so that they can rise up in popularity or the social circles. So as we were starting out the foundation, one of the things that seemed so simple and logical for us was to try to engage the bystander, the passive bystander, and get them engaged into being an active upstander. Initially, what we wanted them to do was intervene by one of three ways: either interrupting the situation if they felt comfortable, which sometimes is as simple as if they're friends and they're making jokes or think they're sarcastic and using words to harm people, to just say that's not funny, or just tell the person to walk away. The second way is if you are young and you don't feel that you're safe and you feel that there's a physical threat of violence, to report it to a trusted adult. And even if it's part of the LGBTQ community, almost all schools have a safe teacher or safe administrator, someone who's safe to tell. And if you're telling to help someone and to prevent them from harming themselves or others harming them as well, it's not outing them, it's not tattling. You need to tell a trusted adult. And the third most important way is to reach out to the target. Make sure they know their resources. Make sure they know you're there for them, that you're their friend, and they know where to go for help. Tyler had access to resources. He had a really supportive school. Rutgers is a supportive school. He had resources at home. And if somebody had intervened and said, reach out to them, or brought in an adult that could have come in and helped Tyler through that difficult moment, I definitely think he would have been here. I know some people battle with depression lifelong. I've talked with parents that thought that it was inevitable that their child would die by suicide. I don't think that for Tyler. I think this was a one-time incident, and if he could have seen his way through it, he would be here today. And that is true of many people, not for all, but for many. And I think that is really important. And part of being an upstander, of course, is always to treat others with kindness, respect, and compassion. Being careful of your words you choose and your actions you take. So that's what an upstander is. So simple, isn't it? And you can do that by going to our website, www.tylerclementi.org. Matter of fact, I actually, see there, how's that? I have an upstander pledge right here.
There it is.
Convenient. But it's also online, and we would love to have people come and join us. We are actually in the midst of a Million Upstander movement. We started it last October at our Upstander Legacy Celebration, and we want 1 million Upstanders by the fall of 2020, the anniversary of Tyler's, the 10-year anniversary of Tyler's death. And we're almost there. We're about a quarter of the way there. So it's exponential, right? So we're going to get there. So come and join and sign up on our website.
Well, one of our viewers, Cynthia, says, I'm an upstander. I signed up. So there's...
Yay, thank you. There's an upstander. I think if we can change culture, this is the way to do it. We can do it one person at a time and just growing exponentially. And we can create a culture shift of kindness, respect, and compassion. I am confident of that.
Yeah. Well, it makes all the difference. I mean, it really does. If you have a culture that rewards bullying behavior, then you get more people behaving in those kinds of ways. But if you create a culture that says, we as a community, we're standing against that, and this is what it means to be, part of this community, is that we don't tolerate bullying. We don't tolerate making anybody feel less than. We, not only that, but we're not going to be bystanders. We're going to be upstanders, and we're going to actively intervene in the kinds of ways that you talked about whenever we see this happen. That is a culture that really does save lives. It absolutely does.
Absolutely.
And I think that it is so important for us all to remember that we have that power, that we really can make a difference, that one person, I mean, you look at the big issues in the world, on the, world political stage and all that. And sometimes it can be frustrating where you see bad things happening and you say, well, I'm one person. What power do I have to do anything? But being an upstander and actively getting involved whenever you see somebody who is being talked down to, is being treated as less than, or is just going through, difficult times for whatever reason, like being somebody who actively gets involved to help folks and to make things better in that way, that is an easy way for one person to make a tremendous difference and to literally save lives. So I'm so grateful for the message that you're carrying and the work that you're doing.
Thank you. And I do believe that it can happen from the bottom up, because that's what we want. But we also think we need good leaders from the top down. And I don't believe it's partisan. I do believe it's bipartisan. Every political leader that we have should be able to look at that Upstander pledge and take it and sign it and acknowledge that they are not going to target anybody's character and destroy another person's character, but talk and speak to the issues respectfully. And that's how we build bridges. And that's what we need, is we need to build those bridges. So actually, one of the other initiatives of the foundation is we are reaching out to all of the presidential candidates to sign our Upstander pledge. And we have already reached out, I think 6 or so. We have one Upstander among them already signed, and 2 or 3 that are reviewing it, because of course they get lots and lots of things to sign and putting their name to lots of different pledges. But we do believe that this will change lives. So when we get a few of those signatures, we will make it public. We won't make it public first, because we're not being partisan. We're not endorsing anyone. We are calling all our political candidates to be upstanders.
Oh, yeah, well, and you're right. That shouldn't be partisan at all. I mean, that's about character, and that's about caring about other people's humanity. And I'm such a believer that we can disagree on things politically and still care about each other as human beings.
Absolutely. Thank you. And it could, one other thing that just to bring into mind when you're thinking about being an upstander is that there's also something called a bystander effect. So the more people that see something happen, the less likely somebody is to stand up and say something. So just hold that in the back of your mind for a little bit, because I probably fall into that trap too. It's like, I'm not a real outgoing person, believe it or not. This is so out of my comfort zone. But if there's a group of us, I feel like, oh, there's somebody that's going to be bold and somebody else that's going to have the right words and the right something, whatever it is. But, it doesn't really matter what the words are. It just means you have to intervene and show that you are there respectfully to stop that harassment. And I don't believe anyone should be harassed because of anything that makes them special, precious, such as, or different, which is the reason why people target. So, race or religion or the language they speak or their sexual orientation or gender identity or whatever makes them special or precious. And you can have your political viewpoints, but you have to be respectful to everyone. And that's the goal of our foundation. One of it. Part of the goal. The mission is to put an end to bullying.
Yeah, well, I love that, and I appreciate that. So I'm looking at all the things I want to ask you about, and I'm trying to decide what to ask next. So, okay, so let me give you a chance to talk about a couple other things that the foundation is doing, and then we'll talk about some other stuff. And at the end, I want to give people a very concrete ask, ways that they can, in a very concrete way, get involved. So if you're watching this and you're, don't have time to watch the whole thing, you want to skip ahead to the end. If you're watching it live, you can't skip ahead. But if you're watching it, recorded, you want to skip ahead. At the very end, we'll have an ask for you. But in addition to the Upstander pledge, there's a program called Day One. And I wanted to give you a chance to say something about what Day One is.
Sure. After we designed the Upstander pledge, we realized that really what we really truly wanted to do was prevent bullying before it happens. And we believe that we can create that culture shift. And it's a research-based initiative that we started a few years ago. And it is where it's available online. So if you go to tylerclementi.org, #day1, you can find a script that you can download, and it's for a leader in an organization to read the script to create a safe space in that environment for marginalized or stigmatized youth. But it's about creating safe boundaries, and boundaries where those people that want to push them will know exactly where it's too far. So the leader stands up on the first day and states that no one here will be targeted or humiliated because of the body shape of their body, the language they speak at home, who they worship, how they worship, the color of their skin, the gender, their gender identity, or their sexual orientation, whatever makes them special and precious. And I believe that is so important because not only for the person that's going to be aggressive and push those boundaries to have it clearly marked out and posted on the wall, but for the marginalized or stigmatized child in the room. I always think of it through Tyler's eyes. Wouldn't that have been wonderful for Tyler to have heard that he knew he was going to be safe in the space, in his dorm room, at his college. And actually, Rutgers did read it on convocation a couple times already since we initiated it in 2015. So it is an important message. And we have started doing it more than just for schools or for the Greek system as well as workplaces, but we've also added that into our True Faith Doesn't Bully initiative. And we've done it for a Christian community and we've done it for the Jewish community. And we have this wonderful contractor working for us that is helping us to write our Christian Day One. I believe he's on the other side of the screen. Justin, you were working and helping us to do this, weren't you?
Yeah. So full disclosure, I was going to say this when we got to it, but thanks for bringing it up that I've had a chance to work with you on some of this faith stuff, alongside some other great folks. So, and I am have been just incredibly honored to have the chance to be a part in that, because I think it's incredibly important, and I think it's important. It's important across all lines. It's important not just, in faith spaces, and not just, specifically in Christian spaces where most of the work that I do is, but it's important across lines. But it certainly is important in churches and in other faith communities. I know growing up in church, as much as I wish I could say that there was no bullying that ever happened in churches, that's simply not true. And in some cases, especially when we talk about LGBTQ folks, religious language and religious teachings have been used to harm people, to make people feel less than. It has been part of bullying in some cases. And I, as a Christian, desperately want that not to be the case, but I know that it is the case. And so I think that it's particularly important for those of us who are people of faith to take that stand, as upstanders, and not in spite of our faith, but because of our faith, to say my faith is one of the things that leads me to stand up against bullying and to stand up for the folks who others have considered less than. I mean, as a Christian, I think that's what Jesus did. It's one of the things that Jesus was criticized for. I love to quote that passage that Jesus was accused of being a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of sinners. And, there are worse things. So, but I think that idea of being criticized for making his friends, the people he ate and drank with, the people he hung out with, the folks who others considered the lowest of the low, the folks that others put down and looked down upon, we certainly ought to be standing up for anybody who's bullied in any context. Right. So,
and our true our day one #day1 is for all people for all reasons, but our faith day one is specifically targeted and speaks to those same words that you were saying, because as I was learning more and more about bullying, I was finding that it wasn't just one youth to another or just out on the playground, but I thought that there was bullying between powers, such as with legislative initiatives, which is why we support the Tyler Clementi Higher Education Anti-Harassment Act, as well as I started seeing it happening from the pulpit as well. And I just really strongly feel that we need to change those misguided teachings and traditions of dogma and bias and discrimination that just totally devalue the human spirit and cause so much pain and despair. And we need to really make sure that we look at these scriptures with eyes from the 21st century, and not from the first century, because in my humble opinion, as I was trying to find my way through these scriptures, because I could not help Tyler. I didn't know what was happening, and I wasn't prepared for when he came out, but I did know my older son was gay as well, and I needed to protect James. And as I was navigating through and I was deciding, is it something that I need to walk away from? Is God not going to keep my son safe, my older son safe? He, in my eyes at that point, felt like he had abandoned Tyler, I think, a little bit at that point when I was angry with God. But I knew one thing I needed to do was keep James safe. And that is why, as I started looking through scripture and reading about how everyone is perfectly created in God's eyes, including my son James, was so important for me to continue. And that's why we have the True Faith Doesn't Bully initiative. And one of the verses that when I was going through this turmoil and this time, and certainly people from my old church were giving me one bit of information, and I was starting to read great books like Torn and God and the Gay Christian, although this was actually pre-God and the Gay Christian because I met Matthew about this time though. But anyway, I came across a verse in John that really navigated me through this, or helped me navigate when I wasn't certain. And it was Jesus saying that the evil one who comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and it's Jesus, Jesus, who come to give life and to give it abundantly. So if something or teaching was stealing away my son, or was breaking apart our family, was killing my youngest child, that wasn't of God. God is good, and God would give life. So I had to make sure that I was reading it with those eyes, because I know that you cannot change someone's sexual orientation. We all know that, and we need to make sure that that is spread and shouted wide, and making sure that people know that being gay is not a sin. That is key. I like to try to get that in, because that's the crux of it, and we need to make sure everyone knows that.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it's easy to underestimate how much it wears on your soul when you hear over and over from your church, from your Christian support network, that not anything that you've done, but simply who you are, is a sin, is an abomination to God. I think that a lot of Christians, there are all kinds of theological questions that we can discuss, around this topic, and on this show I try to, as much as I can, but like, I know that the message that I heard from a lot of Christians growing up was that simply being gay was itself this horrific abomination to God. And when I realized I was gay, it was terrifying. And it was the amount of stress that I lived with every day, feeling like that my every thought and my every moment of existence was somehow this giant disappointment to God. It can't be overstated how much that harms a person. And so it kills me that there are still folks who are hearing that all the time. And it's one of the things that I try, and I know you try to open people's eyes to the harm that's present in that kind of theology.
And even worse is when they turn their back on their faith, because that's one of the things that broke my heart the most when Tyler came out to me. And I was confused with words of wisdom for him, other than I just said how much I loved him, and I knew God loved him, out of the love of my heart. But unfortunately, Tyler must not have been receiving it in that vein, mostly because of what he probably had been learning in Sunday school and in youth group. Because our church didn't totally preach it. I don't think I even heard it, although I understood it to be the case, which is strange. But the message is so huge, and it speaks to all the issues at hand. And I would hear one thing, and I'm sure if you were sitting there, you would have heard something else. And Tyler was hearing something else. But I know he was, after the fact, learning it in Sunday school because of the things that I found folded up in his Bible. And that's something that took a long time for me to move on from.
Yeah.
Because what he must have been experiencing then must have been awful, and I was not a part of it. Tough stuff.
Yeah. We're getting comments from other folks who are sharing some of their stories of ways that they've also heard these messages, and I apologize to folks. I'm not going to have time to read all of these on the show, but I am seeing them now, and anybody who wants to read them, you can see them on the Facebook feed for this episode. I am so appreciative of you all for sharing that. Thank you. I want to ask, Jane, how do you when you think about these things, as you of course you do you have you learned any ways to keep you from getting back into that spiral? Because I know, never having experienced the kind of thing that you experienced with Tyler's death, I know with the painful moments in my past, there are things that I find it difficult to avoid getting just trapped in, constantly reliving over and over why didn't I do this differently? Why didn't I do that differently? If I had realized then what I realize now, and playing things over and over in my head to the point that it doesn't help anything. I can only imagine that you've struggled with that as well. Have you found any ways around that to, stop yourself from going there?
Regret is a terrible place to live, let me tell you. And I've lived there for many months, many years.
Oh, Jane, I think.
And
oh, sorry, we lost you there for just a second. I'm sorry. Start your sentence over.
So let's see if I can get back that far. So
Sorry.
I said regret is a terrible place to live. And I have learned often that I can identify as I'm starting down that spiral. And I can then hear my therapist, and I advise good mental health counseling for everyone. I had a wonderful mental health provider, and I can hear her voice saying, you didn't know any better. You did what you did out of love. And that's the best you can do looking back, but you can't stay in that space. You have to do better in the future. And that's what part of starting the foundation is doing better. But certainly hearing your son, whom I thought, and I know in my heart because he prayed to ask God into his life and accepted him as his savior. But to hear him say that meant nothing to him because he couldn't be gay and be Christian still breaks my heart. And I'll probably not feel so good this evening after we hang up. It's been a tough week, maybe because I've been going back to that space. And I tried to move forward and look forward and point myself forward, staying in the place, but knowing that there's hope and there is better and there is good. But those moments from the past do creep in, and it is not a good space. I do use prayer. I do journal. I journal less now, and I used to journal every day for hours practically, and now I barely journal at all. But when I get in a tough spot, I like to write it down. It's almost my way of getting it out. Once you get it out, like, you don't need to hold on to it anymore, right? I can just send it out into those pages. Not that anybody will read those pages, but maybe, who knows, maybe someday. But I do like to journal. I get comfort from prayer. I like to share with my therapist. That's very helpful. I like to exercise slightly sometimes. When I really get stuck, I'll go out for a walk, and that helps as well. These days, now that the lawn is growing, I get to mow the lawn and walk back and forth and see nature, and that puts me in a better space, even though I get tired. Maybe being tired is helpful too. But it is it's a tough place to be, and fortunately, the timing usually works too, and that's not my control. I think that's just God's perfect timing. I'll get stuck into it, and then somebody will reach out with an email or send a text or a post or a comment on an instant message or a phone call, or someone I encounter in person, and they share with me how important it is, this work, or how important Tyler's story meant to them, or something about the foundation, or something of a common friend that we have. It's all about relationships for me. Relationships are really, really important. Those are the things that work for me. I'm not so sure. But I also get stuck sometimes. We all do, right? Don't we all get stuck?
Yeah. And you know what? Maybe it's important for us to just all be able to acknowledge that it's okay that the past still affects us, because we're human, and there's there's we would have to not be human to no longer be affected by the painful things in our past that have shaped us.
For me, it's holding that tension. It's like two things. And for the longest time, I couldn't have any joy or happiness. I couldn't even wish somebody a happy birthday because I didn't want that word to come out of my mouth. But it's learning to experience that I can be happy and I can feel joy and I can feel surrounded by love and have that hope for a future and still experience the pain, because I don't think that pain will ever go away. It's certainly lessened. When I would pray early on, I didn't know what else to pray for because I couldn't figure out what I wanted. But the only thing I wanted was rest and peace, and to find peace. And then, interestingly, just about 2 years ago, I read something that the Hebrew for shalom means healing, and it also means harmony. So holding that and finding harmony, intention there, and that's your healing. And it means blessing as well. And I have certainly been blessed in my journey. I can't deny that. God can turn anything into good things. He's of good. He doesn't create these bad, negative things that happen to us. It has to be clearly stated. But he can help us move forward. And he can, or she. I'm flexible with that. I've been taught the old school way that God is he, Abba, Daddy, Father, loving Father. So I'm old. I tend to use he, but it could be she, or they actually is more inclusive to me because God is so big. How could they be a gender? I don't know.
Well,
what are your thoughts on that, Justin?
Oh, you're going to put that on me.
You didn't expect that question. Not enough time left to answer that one.
Last 10 minutes of the show. What do you think about the gender of God, Justin? Oh boy. You know what? I'm gonna say something. Well, let me think how controversially I want to put this. I always say that I don't. I grew up, also hearing masculine language for God, in church and in the Bible, and at the same time also understanding why that's difficult and painful for some folks, in the same way that for some folks the image of God as a father in particular can be a painful image depending on their own experience with fathers, and also hearing from folks why hearing, say, feminine language for God can be challenging. I mean, it's such a complicated issue. But ultimately, my theological answer is I don't believe that God has gender. I don't think there's anything in the Bible that suggests that God has gender. The Bible suggests that all human beings are created in the image of God, equally in the image of God. And so in that sense, God does not have gender. And sometimes if I want to put it a bit more crassly, I will simply say that I do not believe that that God has genitals, or we'll maybe even put that more explicitly. That, I don't think, and of course, when I say stuff like that, I'm not getting into, distinction between biological sex and gender, which is also a thing, and that, but in the sense that ultimately, I think that gender and sex both, I believe, are a component of who we are, as physical earthly creatures. And I don't see anything in the Bible to suggest that God has any of that. So I think that God is far more concerned about, I'm sure, I'll get the angry letters now, but I think that God is far more concerned with how we treat people and with whether we are living out the kind of love that God has shown us, the way that Jesus taught us to, than with the pronouns that we're using for God. And so I've been doing ministry. Well,
so well put.
Trust me, I'm sure I'll get the angry letters, but I've been doing ministry long enough that I have heard the passionate arguments from folks on all sides of the debate about pronouns for God. And I could spend an hour probably making one case and then turn around and spend an hour making a different case. And I get it. And I get why it's so important to people. But I also what I'm going to say is I am not the one to go in and tell somebody that that's the wrong word to use. Like, that's not my concern. My concern is about, how do we live out this faith that we say that we believe in? That's what I really care about. So
God sees our heart, not our stuff, not our external stuff, but our heart.
Absolutely. Okay, let me ask you something that's less serious, because this has been a very serious conversation for good reason, because this is painful and stuff for you and for the folks who are watching and listening. But I know that you told me before you came on the show that you had already done some research, because that it has been this running joke on this show that very often one of our viewers will ask the guest of the week if they like pineapple on pizza. And I'm not really sure why that became this joke, but it's a thing that people get asked, do you like pineapple on pizza? Yes or no? And you told me that you knew this and you've done research. What did you do?
Absolutely. So I knew this was coming, and I wanted to be prepared for this hour. I mean, a whole hour to talk, but this was the important decision: is, do I like pineapple on pizza? And I thought I had it many, many years ago, and I wasn't really sure. So while I was visiting a friend in Southern California in LA last week, my friend Ed said, you have to be prepared, Jane. We are going to do research. And so we had to have a pizza with pineapple. And it's a thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
I do like that. Yes, thumbs up. Very good. I love it. I don't know that I'll order it again, because that's not my all-time favorite topping. It is right up there with them, though. But my all-time favorite, I guess pineapple is your all-time favorite. Is it your all-time favorite?
It's one of them, but I'm curious to know, what's your all-time favorite?
Okay, because that's what you should start asking people, because now people are going to really say, ugh. But I love anchovies on my pizza. Sorry about that.
Do you really?
I do. Now, see, there's the secret question you were waiting to ask. Dumbfounded.
I didn't know. Well, you know what? I've never had anchovies on pizza. I think my whole life I've always heard anchovies on pizza as a kind of a joke, as like the gross topping that people like to talk about, how gross, And I don't know that I've ever gotten pizza from a place that offered anchovies as an option. So now I need to go figure out where I can get anchovies on pizza so that I can try it.
You'll have to come visit me. You have to come back up to New Jersey and visit me, and I'll get you your anchovies.
Okay.
All right? Because anchovies were big in my household growing up with my Italian grandmother. She cooked lots of stuff with anchovies, believe it or not.
All right. Well,
if you like salt, you'll like anchovies. That's the key. That's the key.
I do like salt, so...
well, there you go.
And my blood pressure is great, so I can have all the salt I want.
I'm with you there. Until it goes high, I'm eating all the salt I like. I'm definitely a saltaholic.
All right. Well, so it's about time for us to wrap up, but I promised what was the word that I used? My goodness, it's been one of those days. Promise to give
action.
An action.
You want to give them an action item that they can go and do. Jeff.
Thank you. Yes, that's what I want. So you mentioned that I've been doing some consulting work with the faith stuff at the Tyler Clementi Foundation. And so I know that there are a couple of things that folks can do that would actually be wonderful as part of sharing this message that that you can be an upstander because of your faith and not in spite of your faith. And so one thing is that the foundation is launching this faith challenge, which you can find out about at tylerclementi.org/challenge. And basically the challenge is for folks to, you can read about it on the page, but basically the challenge is for folks to take a picture on Instagram or your favorite social media account, in which there are signs that you can print off on the website that say, I am an upstander because, or true faith doesn't bully, or you can just add it as an overlay on your picture, Snapchat style, but basically to post these pictures to let folks know that you are a person of faith who is an upstander, who's standing against bullying, who's standing for the LGBTQ community as an ally, as a member of the community, that this matters to you because of your faith. And if you can include some images, include a Bible or, a cross or whatever, if you're a Christian, like something that that indicates your faith, with that would be really wonderful. We would love to get a lot of pictures of people of faith as people of faith standing up, because we really want to counter this message that bullying, that people of faith are doing bullying rather than people of faith standing up against bullying. We want the positive message. So that is one thing. And the other thing is, if you are a writer and you would like to do some blogging, we are looking to get some blog posts for the Foundation's New Faith blog, of folks sharing how their faith has led them to be an upstander, ways that you're taking a stand against bullying as a person of faith. So you can shoot me a message and let me know that's a thing you'd like to do. And we would love to get some of that stuff up on the website as well. So those are two ways that I could tell you, as somebody doing some consulting with Jane's wonderful foundation, two things that I know of, that you can do. So there's some action items.
Thank you, Justin. And they can also just pledge to be an upstander right off the bat and be a main upstander, of course, right?
Yes.
And also, maybe you don't know, but there is also a frame that you can use on your picture for social media or even on whatever, and it says, I am an upstander or I'm an upstander. And it's actually rainbow this month for Pride. But you can keep it rainbow for whatever month you want, Justin. Or anybody can keep it rainbow for whatever month they want.
Well, we'll have to make sure we get the details of that up on that website page as well, so that people can learn about that. But yeah, so yes, thank you for reminding me that please become an upstander. That is, that's an important thing to do. Jane, I am so grateful to you. I'm so grateful for your work, for your story, for your willingness to, even in those times when the pain is difficult, to put yourself out there and share this story over and over, as difficult as I know that is, because I really do believe that it makes a tremendous difference. There are so many folks out there who feel alone, and you are out there making a difference in the world. And I'm so grateful to know you and to have this chance to talk to you, as well as to work with you behind the scenes. So thank you. Thank
you, Justin. I value your friendship, and I value the friendship of all the people that I've met along the journey. And some people, it's a long time friendship, and some people it's just a meeting at one time, an intersection of our journeys. And that's been so meaningful to me. So for anyone that's out there listening, if we've met in the past, I have valued that, and I thank you for that. And I truly love working with Justin. Who wouldn't like to be able to talk to Justin once a week? Isn't that wonderful? That is just like such a blessing, such a wonderful, wonderful time. A highlight of my week, Justin.
Oh, you're too kind. Well, it's mutual. Thank you. Thanks everybody for your time and for tuning in this week, as always. And thank you especially to all my Patreon patrons, and extra special thanks to the gold patrons, who are Bruce and Carol, John and Larry and Liz and Tom and Terry. I'm just so appreciative of you all. And thank you, Jane, for your time and for being here and for all your work. Yeah. So everybody, another show next week. Happy Pride. Don't forget, you can always catch the show on YouTube at youtube.com/GeekyJustin, as well as in your favorite podcasting software as GeekyJustin Live. And until next week, be excellent to each other and don't forget the nuance. Good night.
No.
Hmm.